Good morning, and welcome to this worship service at the Unitarian Church in Charleston. I'm Diane Boyer, a member of the Vestry Board, serving as its secretary this year. Our church is an inclusive community of inspiration, love, and service, committed to creating a better world. As Unitarian Universalists, we do not require our members to ascribe to a particular dogma or creed. Rather, we remain open-minded about others' beliefs, learn from them, and actively support each other in our spiritual journeys. There are several ways you can find out more about our church. You can find details about church activities on the church's website, on our Facebook page, and in our online newsletter, The Gateway. If you are a visitor on Zoom right now, who is interested in receiving more information about the church or are considering membership, or you want to receive our online newsletter, The Gateway, you can put that in the chat box now. If you're here in the sanctuary and you want the same information, there should be a blue card in the pew in front of you that you could fill out and put in the collection basket as you leave the church. We're a busy group, even during this pandemic, and so there are several announcements I'd like to highlight this morning. A number of you attended the CAJM, the Charleston Area Justice Ministry Community Problems Assembly recently, where network members voted for environmental justice, or as some are saying, care for creation, to be the problem of focus for this year. You have a chance to participate in the CAJM research process as this group will study the problem and identify solutions. The research kickoff is this coming Monday, November 15th at 6:30 p.m. on Zoom. And again, all of these announcements you'll find more information about online. Also a reminder about the Leadership Council, the meeting that will start at 12:30 this afternoon on Zoom. If you're a committee co-chair or chair, you should have already received this information, but we're encouraging people to attend that. The Eden Keepers, who are our volunteer, fairly small group of devoted people who work in the churchyard monthly, had to cancel yesterday for obvious reasons, and so they're rescheduled for this coming Saturday, weather permitting. Also, the Alliance has asked me to announce that the Alliance Christmas Wreath or Holiday Wreath fundraiser, which will benefit the church, is having the final orders need to be in by today. You'll find Priscilla Shumway in the back of the church over there in that corner with a sample of the wreath after the service. If you're present here and interested in ordering, buy for yourself, buy for your neighbors. Someone's holding up the wreath there in the back just for you to see a sample. The Alliance hasn't been able to hold its famous rummage sales recently because of the pandemic, and so we are attempting to raise funds through other means, and the funds, if anybody's interested, we could tell you, but over the past years, the Alliance has donated thousands of dollars to various projects around the church. So this is a worthwhile endeavor, and you get some lovely holiday decorations as well. If you're on Zoom, you can go on the church's website and also order, but you need to do that today because all the orders are going to be sent in to the supplier tomorrow. So please consider that. And finally, I want to mention the service auction, which is looking for a silver lining this year. The silent auction opened for bids this past week, and they will be taking bids until Friday, November 12th at 5 p.m. So go online, look at the many offerings for the silent auction. There are a few items on there, just to give you a little preview, that they say live at the top, and those are items that will be sold at the live auction, which you should put in your calendars, will be on January 22nd at 6 p.m. A mixed service you could attend in person or online for that. This is a major fundraiser for the church, so I encourage you to bid often and bid high. After the service, those of you who are attending via Zoom will receive an invitation to join a small group breakout room for coffee hour. Unfortunately, although in past weeks the people who've been attending in person have been having an outdoor coffee hour gathering, the weather really isn't conducive for that today. And so there will not be a coffee hour, sorry to say, for those of you who are physically present here. And finally, Reverend Rebecca is going to give you the latest information about our reopening plans. So thanks again to everyone for joining us, and join the service.
So it is so good to see all of you here this morning. I'm looking forward to seeing more of you in the near future. So this is an exciting moment in our time together, and we are looking, because of a couple things, the Delta variant is on the decline, and we've been carefully following numbers, and vaccines are now available to 5 to 11-year-olds, which is a huge, important step in making sure everybody in our community is safe. We are going to reopen fully on November 21st. So next, yay, thank you. I was hoping somebody would clap. So here's what you can expect. Today is our first day using the new AV system. So we have Jeremy back there. He's going to hate that I'm doing this, but yay! He's doing awesome. Susan's helping him out. Other Susan was instrumental in getting this set up, and Sandra and the rest of the staff and Fox Music did a great job. So the user at home, the person worshiping from home will have an elevated experience because we now have new equipment. Next Sunday, the 14th, we will be all together outdoors at Stono Preserve. I want to make Stono Preserve. James Island County Park, Stono Preserve. Bring a canned good and food that you're going to eat yourself. We're not going to share food with each other, but what you can eat yourself for a shared picnic. There'll be a band. And this will not be live streamed, so it's just in person, and we're really hoping to see this as a chance to embrace being together. Then, on the 21st, all are welcome to come here, wear a mask, and worship with us. And if you choose to worship at home, you still can do that, and go to our website. We will be going off of Zoom to a new platform, which will be right on our website. You just go there, and you can watch from home. So that's the plan. Any questions, let me know. James Luther Adams, distinguished Unitarian minister, scholar, and theologian, was born 120 years ago this week on November 12th, 1901. He is a key figure in our UU history, and as we are entering into a month in which our theme is history, I thought we could spend some time today honoring and reflecting on his work. Our opening words this morning are from James Luther Adams and can be found in our gray hymnal, number 591. I'm going to read this, but if you want to follow along, you are welcome to turn to 591. I call that church free, which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence, that sustaining and transforming power not made with human hands. It binds together families and generations, protecting against the idolatry of any human claim to absolute truth or authority. This covenant is the charter and responsibility and joy of worship in the face of death as well as life. I call that church free, which brings individuals into a caring, trusting fellowship that protects and nourishes their integrity and spiritual freedom, that yearns to belong to the church universal. It is open to insight and conscious from every source. It bursts through rigid tradition, giving rise to new and living language, to new and broader fellowship. It is a pilgrim church, a servant church, on an adventure of the Spirit. The goal is the prophethood and priesthood of all believers, the one for the liberty of prophesying and the other for the ministry of healing. It aims to find unity in diversity under the promptings of the Spirit that bloweth where it listeth and maketh all things new.
Good morning. My name is Claudia Updike, and I'm worship associate this morning, along with my fellow worship associate, Stephanie Masline, on Zoom. It is my great pleasure this morning to welcome and invite Mary Ann Terry to light the lovely chalice that she so generously commissioned for our sanctuary. Thank you, Mary Ann. Our chalice lighting words this morning are called "For the Memory That Heals and Holds" by Reverend Scott Taylor. We light this chalice in honor of the history that holds and heals us, for the stories of heroism that inspire our own, for the faces of loved ones who have passed, in whose images we see our better selves, for reminders of those who paved the path on which we travel and blessed us with advantages we didn't earn all on our own. These memories do not live in the past. They carve the contours of our present. They throw themselves into our futures and lure us into building a better life for all. Here today, look, listen, let them in. May their light guide our way.
Something that I love about our faith, Unitarian Universalism, is that we respect and honor everyone's path that they are on. And we also draw from 6 sources. And one of those sources is the Old Testament. Now, you don't often hear me telling biblical stories, but today you get the honor of hearing the story of David and Goliath. And so it goes. A long time ago, God was looking for a new king of Israel to replace King Saul, who had greatly displeased God. God sent his servant Samuel to the house of Jesse and asked him to anoint one of his sons. The youngest, David, was the one chosen and anointed. And since that day, God's Spirit was always with David. Meanwhile, Saul was still the king, and he ruled people called Israelites. David and his family were Israelites too, and the Israelites weren't getting along with the people named the Philistines. The problem with the Philistines was that they had many giants living on their land, and one of the strongest and biggest giants was named Goliath. He was over 9 feet tall, which is taller than any person in the Guinness World Book of Records. And he would have had to bend down pretty far to get through our doors. Now, Goliath was covered with armor to protect him, and he carried a big spear. And every morning and every evening for 40 days, he shouted to the Israelites in his big, deep voice, "Hey, you guys, I dare you to find one man to fight me. And if he can beat me, we will become your servants. But if I win, you will become our servants." Now, when King Saul and all his men heard this, they were very afraid. And some of those men were David's 3 older brothers. And they were the only ones in David's family who could go fight because they were old enough. David was still very young. Now, David's father, Jesse, heard about the giant, and he was worried about his sons. So he called David out of the field and asked him to go check on his brothers and give them some food and report back to how they were doing. So David set off to visit his brothers. And as he approached him, he heard Goliath shouting his challenge like he did every morning. And David asked, "Isn't somebody going to stand up to this giant?" He looked at the men in the army, and nobody could. And he said, "Well, then I will fight the giant." Now, one of the men overheard this and ran to King Saul and told him what David said. And King Saul approached David and said, "You can't fight Goliath. You are only a boy. And he has been fighting for many years. You've never fought." But David corrected him, and he said, "I have fought lions and bears to protect my father's sheep, and God has helped keep me safe, and he will keep me safe now." Now, it's too bad that King Saul didn't have the same trust in God to help him, and he didn't know what to do to beat Goliath. And so when this young boy David came, he knew exactly what to do in one day, and he trusted that God would help. So Saul dressed David in heavy armor to protect him from Goliath, but David just took it off. It was too heavy. He could hardly walk, and he knew that God would keep him from harm. Instead, David went to a stream nearby, and he found 5 smooth stones. And he put them in a little pouch around his waist, and with his sling, he went to Goliath. As David approached Goliath, Goliath looked at David and thought it was a joke. Goliath thought that he could easily beat David, and it was funny that Saul would send such a small boy to fight him. But David said to him without fear, "You fight with a sword, and I come with God on my side, and today everyone will know that there is one true God in this land." Goliath did not care what David said, and he moved closer to attack him, and David ran quickly to meet him, and he reached into his pouch, and he pulled out his stone and his slingshot, and he shot it right at Goliath. And do you know where it hit him? Does anybody know? Where did it hit him? Right there, right in between his head, in between his eyes, right on the head. And suddenly Goliath started to lose his balance. Can you imagine a 9-foot giant losing his balance from one stone? And he fell with a loud thud right on his face. And David had done it. He had beat the giant. And when the rest of the Philistines saw this, they ran away, and David became a hero to all the people in Israel. And that, my friends, is the story of David and Goliath.
Our reading this morning is based on James Luther Adams' essay called Guiding Principles for a Free Faith. This is found in his book on becoming human religiously. We gather as Unitarian Universalists to understand, articulate, and live our liberal religion. David brought down the giant Goliath with 5 smooth stones, but we use our 5 smooth stones to build a more just, loving, and free world. Our first stone reminds us that we are part of a living tradition in which revelation is continuous. Together, we engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Our second stone reminds us that we freely choose to enter into relationship and community with one another. Together, as people of conscience, we build relationships of justice, equity, and compassion that further the wholeness of the interdependent web of all existence. Our third stone reminds us that we have a moral obligation to work towards establishing a just and loving community. Together, we speak and act prophetically with the goal of world community, with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Our fourth stone reminds us that good things happen as a result of human effort. Together, as beings with inherent worth and dignity, we create goodness and virtue. Our fifth stone reminds us that the divine and human capacities for achieving meaningful change are reason for optimism. Together, we may be hopeful that change will occur toward a more just, loving, and free world. The roots of our living tradition have been developed over centuries, but new ideas and understandings are still being revealed. Some stones are smooth and polished, while others are newly found and rough. We are part of this living tradition. Through it, we become whole, and through us, our tradition becomes whole.
Thank you, Claudia. And thank you, Danielle, for sharing our story. As you heard in the story of David and Goliath, the Philistine army was big and strong. They had a lot of people. They had trained warriors ready to fight, and they had control of a precious resource at that time, iron, which meant they had lots of swords and shields and armor to go around. And on top of all that, they had a giant, Goliath. What did the Israelites have? Not as many people, not as much gear. They were at a significant disadvantage to begin with. And then here comes David. No weapons, no experience, no armor. And it certainly feels like a setup, right? Surely the giant is going to win. What in the world could David possibly do with 5 smooth stones in his pocket in the face of so much adversity? The world James Luther Adams lived in the 20th century was also full of adversity. Born in 1901, he grew up in a Baptist fundamentalist family and lived through the First World War as a young man. In the 1920s, he converted his word to Unitarianism and went off to Harvard Divinity School to become a minister. After graduation, he became a professor of theology at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago. And in 1935, he went to Germany to study with some of the greatest theologians of that time. Adams was eager to learn from scholars in the great tradition of German biblical criticism and religious liberalism. After all, they had inspired the American transcendentalists of the 19th century and Unitarians in general in America for generations. So this was a big opportunity for him. But when he got to Germany, he was gravely disappointed. It was the 1930s. What was going on in the 1930s in Germany? The Nazis were on the rise, and the German liberal churches were doing nothing, as far as Adams could tell anyway. For some reason, they didn't seem to be making an impact or much of a difference, and Adams watched in horror as the Third Reich rose to power. He experienced it all firsthand, even getting detained himself for questioning by the Gestapo at one point. So this experience marked Adams forever. He spent the rest of his life wrestling with the concept of how liberal religion, liberal churches could better organize and act and actually stand up and make a difference. In other words, Adams spent his life wanting to figure out how Unitarianism could survive and thrive in the face of adversity. You see, the German churches Adams was so disappointed in were part of liberal religion, our tradition. We trace our theological and historical roots back to the same sources. But it didn't seem to be cutting it anymore in the 20th century. So perhaps Adams felt like the Israelites up against the Philistines. And I know we all do sometimes, right? The world is full of lots of large, looming problems and dangers. It's a lot to face. Some folks experience this and spend energy working hard to protect themselves and the values they hold dear. One way to do this is to put on the heavy armor of creeds and doctrines. That's fine, that works for some. But for us, for religious liberals, we tend to have a different approach. We travel lightly. And so it was that James Luther Adams was inspired by David in the story and used this inspiration to come up with his own version of the 5 smooth stones. And I want to share those with you today. The 5 smooth stones of liberal religion is what he called them. Small enough to carry in your pocket, but mighty enough to make a big impact and change the world. For Adams, these were guiding principles of a free faith, and he suggested we can use them as touchstones, as places to ground ourselves as practitioners of this free faith, our living tradition, in our own time, whatever Goliaths we are facing in our own age. So, number one. First stone is religious liberalism depends on the principle that revelation is continuous. Revelation is continuous. What the heck does that mean? Anybody heard of that before? I'm sure you have. You may have heard it said, revelation is not sealed. That's another way people say it. What it means is that in our tradition, we adopt a posture of curiosity and learning. We don't assume that we have all the information or inspiration already and that we never will, because we are always learning. Truth is always unfolding. New truths are always revealing themselves. So if I were to reduce stone number 1 into a word, I would call it learning. Learning. So, number 2. All relations between persons ought ideally to rest on mutual free consent and not coercion. In our congregations, we choose to be in relationship with one another. We don't use coercion or guilt or force. We delight in the fact that each and every one here and on Zoom is here by choice, held in love, not out of duress. So if this were a one-word stone, I'd call it community. And number 3, religious liberalism affirms the moral obligation to direct one's effort toward the establishment of a just and loving community. It is this which makes the role of the prophet central and indispensable in liberalism. So, this one makes sense to us. In our tradition, we experience a moral mandate to make the world a better place. We see ourselves as part of the larger community and work for justice for all. This stone, justice. 4, we deny the immaculate conception of virtue and affirm the necessity of social incarnation. That's a mouthful. What I think he means is that we don't assume that good things happen because we want them to. We see ourselves as agents in the world, capable of making good things happen. And when we do this, when we act, that impulse is love itself. We are love incarnate. We make it real. So I would call that stone love. And finally, the 5th stone, liberalism holds the resources, divine and human, that are available for the achievement of meaningful change, justify an attitude of ultimate optimism. Ultimate optimism. Are any of you ultimately optimist? No, yes. Some yeses, some no's. Depends on the day for me. I'm not the best at this one. But the 5th stone is reminding us that even when hope is hard to find and we're not sure what is going to happen next, we have reason to hope. We have what we need to heal and transform the world. 5th stone, hope. So these are the 5 smooth stones from James Luther Adams, which I have taken the liberty of reducing to learning, community, justice, love, and hope. There are countless Goliaths out there in the world right now. For example, we are experiencing a rise in authoritarianism in our own country. We're experiencing division, separation in our country. And we have this massive, lumbering giant of coronavirus to deal with. It's a lot to face. And so we do. We suit up, put our armor on, we get vaccinated, we wear masks, we protect ourselves and those around us, particularly the most vulnerable. These are all good tools. But let's not forget the most important tools of all, the 5 stones in our pocket. As we face the challenges of this particular moment, 20 months into a global pandemic, on the verge of emerging from its deathly grip, I think it's time to put them to good use. The next few months are going to be challenging. And for us here at the Unitarian Church, we are going to have some unique challenges as we reopen the church. Not the least of which, perhaps, might be how strange it feels to be together after being apart for so long. And I know that's going to take some getting used to, so it might feel awkward. It's okay. We'll figure it out together, and we will ease into it. The problem is, if things change or the unforeseen happens, we might have to adjust again. So stay tuned for that, but we are doing the best we can. And as we fumble along this season and figure out each next step, we will be a learning community of justice, love, and hope. We can do this. And perhaps we even have an opportunity here. Perhaps we have a chance in this moment to be discerning about the tools that we use, tools we carry, and why. Perhaps we can intentionally travel a little more lightly and freely into the next chapter of our community life. Perhaps we can lean into that which matters most, let go of the rest. I've been hearing for a long time that the church is dying. This is what they say in magazines and newspapers. This is what they told me when I went off to seminary, and people said, "Why are you doing that? That's a really silly career move. The church is dying." I don't believe that. The church is being reborn. This is our chance, friends, to be midwives. This is our chance to identify any tired old armor we don't need anymore, old habits, to thank them for the purpose they served, let them go. This is our chance to create new systems and structures and programs that meet the needs of people today and speak to the times we are living in now. The 5 smooth stones, that which matters most, are not going to change. But here's what is changing. We are entering into a new governance system, as most of you know. The way decisions are made in this church will start to shift and become more efficient and effective as we focus our energy more clearly on fulfilling our mission and being in accountable relationships. I trust you will experience this as liberating and freeing. Policy governance liberates people for action and positions us for impact in the world, something that James Luther Adams would be very happy about. Something else that's on my mind lately is our religious education program. That may change too. We don't know yet. But what we do know is that Danielle Lopez, our Director of Community and Faith Development, has been doing an incredible job of offering programming and opportunities for connection for families with young children outside of what we are used to with the Sunday school model. Parenting circles have been online during the pandemic. When it was safe to gather, there were family gatherings outdoors in the park. OWL is currently being offered for our middle schoolers on Sunday mornings. I believe they're in class now, in collaboration with Circular Church. And other opportunities have been created for children to be together and learn. They've been cleaning up the beach, watching movies outside, playing together, and enjoying being a UU family. None of that stuff looks necessarily like Sunday school. Maybe that's okay. As we move into a post-pandemic era, the needs are changing, technology is changing, everything is changing every day. And what young people need and want might change too. Heck, what grown-ups need and want might change too. We just don't know yet. But we are a learning community of justice, love, and hope, and you can bet we will figure it out. There are other things that might shift and emerge. Something that I've really enjoyed is the remarkable Lift Your Spirit concert series. The next one is going to be outdoors on November 21st after church. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts on what else we might do in this new season. What other ideas can we lean into and try in this post-pandemic world? After all, as Valerie Cower is known to say, and this sentiment has been a constant companion for me these last few years, perhaps for you too. She says that perhaps this is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb. Beloveds, a lot has changed since March 2020. But what if we're being reborn? As we move forward, as we reopen the church and find new, safe ways to be community, I encourage us all to hold fast to the 5 smooth stones, to the deep truth that we are a learning community of justice, love, and hope, and we will get through this. Trust. We will evolve, develop, mature, and bravely face whatever Goliaths come our way together. May this be so. May we be the ones to make it so. When Susan said she was going to use 5 stones to make a musical offering, I wasn't sure what to expect, but that was awesome. I hope somebody filmed it. Oh, of course we did. Yes, good. That was great. Thank you. This time of year is rich with meaning. This week, 1 out of every 5 people in the world observed Diwali. Diwali is the Indian Festival of Lights, India's biggest and most important holiday of the year. It's celebrated by Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, and Sikhs. It celebrates the triumph of light over darkness and goodness over evil. So I wanted to lift that up because we honor this tradition and share in the hope for more light and goodness in the world. In a few days, it will be Veterans Day, and we honor all those who have served our country. We remember their sacrifices, and we recommit our lives to building a peaceful world. And some of us have meaningful moments personally to lift up this morning from our Book of Life. So I invite you now to hear these offerings. Newcomer Nathan Woodliff Stanley. Hi. Would like to let everyone know how delighted he is to attend services in person today for the first time, and we are happy to see you. He recently moved here from Denver to Charleston with his wife Ruth, who was consecrated on October 2nd as Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of South Carolina, the first woman ever elected bishop here. She has a seating ceremony at Grace Cathedral this afternoon. So we're glad you carved out some time today to join us, Nathan. Nathan is an ordained UU minister, and he says it has been a pleasure to meet with me. Thank you. It's mutual. And to get to know this community. So, Nathan, we welcome you, and we're glad you're joining our community. Mary Ann Terry says she is ever so grateful to have had the opportunity to light the new chalice today. This chalice is what she envisioned for this church long ago, and she sends many thanks to her friends who helped along the way to make this effort possible. Paul Garbarini, Jeffrey Fleming, Priscilla Shumway, and the amazing metalsmith Addison Delisle. Mary Ann, the congregation thanks you for the donation of the beautiful chalice. Thank you very much. And there are a couple of birthdays today, so happy birthday to Kathleen King, and happy birthday to Allison Price, who is turning 15. There is no doubt more joy and more sorrow in our hearts this morning that have not been named out loud. So I invite us now into a moment of reverence, a moment of quiet to pay attention to that which has been named and that which is unnamed, but is quietly there in our own hearts. Let us hold all of it in silence now for just a moment. Amen. And blessed be. We have a member and a guest to introduce our offering, so come on up.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Ray. Each week, we share the plate with a local nonprofit group or community partner. In October, we shared the plate with Habitat for Humanity as part of our biennial community outreach grant program. It was a huge success, and we exceeded our goal. Next Sunday, November 14th, we will be giving the check to Habitat during the service and sharing more with you about this recent success. This week, and for the rest of November, we have an opportunity to share the plate with a local organization, national in scope, called the Slave Dwelling Project. The Slave Dwelling Project's founder and leader, Joe Mcgill, is here to tell you about it. Joe has an illustrious background with the Penn Center, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the National Park Service, and established the African American Museum in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which was subsequently frequented by Reverend Rebecca and her congregation there. Joe is currently also a history consultant for Magnolia Plantation. I will just say this, Joe and the Slave Dwelling Project have had a powerful impact on me. I've participated in 2 of the sleepover events in places where enslaved people lived. Being together with people of all races to honor forgotten people and intentionally speak and listen about the meaning of this history for the present and the future is a critical and inspiring ingredient of bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice. Joe, we welcome you and your wife Valerian to our community. Please come up and tell us a little bit more about the Slave Dwelling Project.
Thank you, David, for the opportunity to come before you. Thank you, Reverend Hine, for the kind words. David and I, we have interacted in the past. David showed up to 2 events, 2 challenging events, I should say, because the Slave Dwelling Project is about buildings, of course, but we, as kind of a bait and switch, we use the buildings to lure the people in to all that the buildings have to offer historically and all that we could talk about those particular buildings. And we spend nights in these buildings, slave dwellings. Wherever they exist, we seek from the stewards of these places the opportunity to spend nights in these places. But that's easy. Anybody can sleep. But the conversations that we have before the sleepover, that's the challenge. That's the substance. Because we talk about slavery and the legacy that is left on this nation. So I've had the opportunity to hang out with David at some of these places. One place in particular was Hyde Park. And going there and knowing that we could spend the night in these spaces was alluring to me. But the opportunity that David gave me by going there, not only to sleep there and have the conversation, but was to explore the grounds. And as we explored the grounds, we came upon a cemetery. And in this cemetery were the owners of the plantation. And also in this cemetery was the overseer, all buried in the same place. And then we explored more, and then we found the graves of the enslaved people at those sites. And what I liked about what David brought to the table and what he's continuing to do is to not only be concerned about the nature, the land, but also the built environment. And in caring about the built environment, of course, we care about the people who inhabited those spaces. So now when I came here today, when I learned about my opportunity to come up here, Thursday of last week, which is not very many days to prepare to stand here and say the things that I'm saying right now. I was a little confused on the day that I got the call because I was off on a day that I'm not usually off. I initially said, no, I can't do this, it's too quick. But here I am, I got my bearings straight, and so here I am. So when I walked in here today, I came through the wrong door, and I ended up there in the balcony. I love buildings. This is a beautiful building. So it gave me time to think about buildings like this and how they were used and who built these spaces. I've been told that there's some place here that I could find a brick or bricks where there are fingerprints. And those are the things that I search for in the things that I do, because I know those fingerprints and those bricks are the fingerprints of the enslaved person that made that brick. It's that enslaved person reaching to us saying that we were here, tell our stories. And as I walked in and I saw the brick formation that was placed there by my personal friend, Rodney Prelo, in the Sankofa, and the fact that the honor, the people, the history of those people is honored here is real great. But, ending up in that space, it speaks to spatial segregation, how these buildings were used historically. Buildings like this were used historically. And then as I sat there and I saw the stained glass, and I said, "Whoa, those folks look like me." I said, "That's amazing." At least the skin tone, which is great enough for me. And I thought about this, guys. You know, to be the recipient of what you guys will be donating to the Slave Dwelling Project is quite meaningful, because on Friday of this week, I've got to get on a plane. I'm going to the state of Virginia. I'm going to do in Virginia what I've been doing all along. It's important because the dynamics have shifted, because what we bring, what we sell to the public is the fact that history should be inclusive of all who existed historically in this nation. And because there's an effort to kind of shy away from that, it's like the message that I heard this morning. I needed to hear your message, Reverend. Thank you. You know, the rocks, that we are armed with the knowledge and the intent of what we need to do to ensure that the history of all in this nation should be put forth. And thank you for the story of David and Goliath, because I feel like a David. I feel like this Goliath is the fact that we got to continue to ensure that the history of all in this nation is being told, being interpreted, being disseminated to the public. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be the recipient of the funds. Just know that you are a part of the cause. You are now one of those stones in helping us to ensure that the experience that David and I had together, that it's open to all. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much. And just a brief note, we're still fumbling along. We haven't quite figured out how to pass the plate or if we are doing it. So plates are in the back. When you leave, you can put your donation there. And if you're at home on Zoom, you can donate through Breeze. And anybody can donate through Breeze on your phone if you're here, and so on. So.
like to ask Mary Ann Terry to come back up to extinguish our chalice. Thank you, Mary Ann. We extinguish this chalice flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
In the long history of our tradition, we are but one wave. We inherit the incredible offerings and gifts of our ancestors, and we forge new ways of being to meet the times. We give birth to the future. Let us go forth and see what we can do. Go in peace.